Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor, the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Link is right here in the description. If you click on that one, you'll bypass the Apple upcharge and any corresponding tariffs. Just click on the link in the description. I just made a turtle now. Click on the link in the description. You get access to 10 different channels, plus stage shows, all of the draft coverage, the most heat anywhere, the most heat conversation, information, consternation, celebration, repudiation. Let's get you an initiation. Check it out. It's Off the Floor. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Includes Prize Picks. Use the code 5FIVE. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks is the official fantasy partner of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Play across the sports spectrum, up to 6 players together. It is legal in the state of Florida. They haven't taken this away from us yet. Not again, anyway. PrizePicks.com. Use the code FIVE and get playing today. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Down to Biscayne, kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. Impact we trust, it's about to have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Eternal Bast. You can follow him at Eternal Bast. You can also find him on Playback. Go to playback.tv/5RSN. These guys were troopers this year. Eternal, Adele, Ray, and Matt in particular. The 4 of them were there to witness some interesting stuff. I'll just leave it at that. Some interesting stuff, including, timeouts called that the Heat didn't have, or Jimmy standing in the corner refusing to do anything. Whatever it is Terry Rozier was doing most of the time. Some of Tyler Herro's late game decisions. Bam Adebayo sleepwalking through the first month of the season. You got to see a lot. But we're towards the end now, and there's one game left. Washington Wizards are coming into town. Get your tickets. Many available. Sunday at 1:00, a game that has no meaning to the Heat. They pretty much ruled out everybody. No Herro, no Bam for sure. A whole bunch of others. This is the practice game that I thought the New Orleans game was going to be. The Heat decided to play their guys, and they set a franchise record for points. And it's really meaningless because they're 10th anyway, and they're going to Chicago next Wednesday. But Eternal and I are going to try to be more positive on this because, again, you were watching all of these games, and there were some green shoots out of this season. It wasn't all bad. We have not shared this with each other, but we're going to try to come up with the 5 positives in a down Miami Heat season. So I think we do it this way. I'll let you start. And then I'll do 2 in a row, and then I'll let you finish with 2. Let's do that. You're the guest here, so you can have 3 of these, or maybe we'll combine on the last one if I get antsy. But just give me one thing this year. There's got to be one that worked out well for the Heat.
Their draft. Their draft did. I think their draft paid some dividends for them. When you look at where they got Khalil with the 15th pick, it was a pick that many didn't like. It was a pick that many didn't think he would be able to really contribute this season, with some thinking that, he wouldn't get his first piece of real, playing time until after the All-Star break. But he was able to, get some spot minutes here and there early in the season. And, then we saw kind of his breakout moment against probably the highest competition for him as far as young guys in Wemby in that Spurs game back in January when things felt like they were okay with a certain player on the team being back. And that having that first moment of him being on the court with Bam and then kind of going from there. And so we've seen, kind of what that can be. But I think just besides him, I think you look at just the hard rock of, high stamina kind of a player that Pella is and what you've been able to get from him diving on the floor, everything that you would want. As we heard from Spo and a role player, you've kind of seen those moments from the young guy this season. So I would say the first positive development would be getting really good production and a lot of great moments out of their two young guys.
Yeah, your mic was out a little bit at the beginning, but I kind of knew where you were going. And look, I think it is a positive. I think anytime that you get production from both of your rookies, both of your drafted rookies, whether or not the team is really good or not really good. I mean, they weren't playing because the Heat had nobody else to play. I mean, this was not that kind of bad team. There were other guys that you could have played. There were other directions that Spoelstra could have gone. And yet ultimately Ware was put in the starting lineup because this was a future decision to move Bam's position, go bigger as soon as the kid was ready. And I'm with you that I was one of those that did not think he would get much playing time until after the All-Star break. So, that was kind of where I was. In fact, I thought Larson would get more minutes than him this year. That did not end up happening. But Larson did end up getting minutes, and he did end up deserving those minutes, and he ended up deserving them over Jaime Jaquez. And so I think with each of these positives, there's a caveat. And my only concern on this about getting too excited about a rookie is that we had a rookie we were really excited about last year in Jaquez, and this was a completely lost year. We're going to get through kind of sophomore slumps in Heat history, but his is right at the top. And so I want to caution people. It's not a straight line. Development is not a straight line. Where will probably, in particular, because he's going to have a bigger role than Larson, will probably have setbacks as he goes forward. I think there's a real, to me, what he needs is clear. He needs strength. I mean, this is not a surprise. He needs strength. Guys like Zubats, who pushed around a lot of people this year, but certainly pushed Ware around. They acted like he wasn't even there. He needs to gain kind of that core strength so that he doesn't get pushed around and he can do some pushing around in the future. But that's something that the Heat are very good at. So I have some confidence that they will get him in the right shape. It does not mean that his development is going to be a straight line. As far as Larson goes, I think what he showed you in the last month of the season was you could trust him in big minutes. And I'm talking about important minutes. Going into next season, that is something you're going to look a lot at because it really, for Spoelstra, always comes down to who can he close with. I think if Larson can just get more consistency on that shot, Larson can become a consistent closer for this team because defensively he competes. He's not afraid of anybody. I love his confidence. I love the way he takes contact. There's a lot of positives there, but the shot will hold him back in terms of playing big minutes. He has to be able to knock down those shots when the Heat's other players are overplayed, or else he's going to remain a back end of the rotation player. If he's going to be front end of the rotation or even a potential starter, he needs to make those shots. All right, let me go to number 2 here. We probably could do more than 5 because, again, it wasn't all bad. But to me, the biggest positive this season comes from the biggest negative, which is that Jimmy Butler forced the Heat to finally choose a direction. That's my overriding thought, because this was a franchise that was stuck in the middle, kind of trying to figure out if you could squeeze a little more out of playoff Jimmy, motivated Jimmy, contract year Jimmy, without really adding a lot to get the team over the top. I mean, I think best case scenario, if you look at the totality of this team and the way that things played out and the way that Rozier and Jaquez in particular were counted on to be among the top 5 or 6 players on this team and did not perform at a high level. In fact, if you take their negatives out, this team probably, like their net ratings, you take those out, this team probably was a plus 500 team. In light of that, I don't think that there was any way for Jimmy to drag this thing over the finish line, even if he was motivated. I just don't. This was a team that probably was a play-in team or a 6 seed, even without his issues. You look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, I don't think they would have been better than Cleveland, Boston, New York. I know Milwaukee had a lot of issues this year, but still the way Giannis performed, I don't necessarily think so. Indiana and Detroit were surprises for different reasons. Maybe you would have finished ahead of one of them, but I don't know. And so I kind of feel like you probably would have been the 7 instead of the 10, maybe the 6. So this was not this was not a sustainable strategy to rely on Jimmy. And that's one of the reasons they didn't give him the extension. Him acting honestly like a child, forced their hand. It forced their hand. I mean, because they weren't even ready to move him until like the very end. Like they were comfortable being uncomfortable until it became completely untenable. And then ultimately made a trade that has netted them a couple of pieces, which I'll talk about later. But I just think, to me, Eternal, the big thing is they're stuck in the middle of the league right now. They ended up with 0.0 net rating. They're stuck in the middle of the league, but at least I don't think they're stuck in a strategy. And I feel like a timeline has been chosen. It's a younger timeline, the roster that way. And so actually, I think we may look back, even as painful, as annoying as it was at the time, at like Jimmy's actions is actually moving this franchise forward maybe a year earlier than they would have otherwise. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it is. I think I disagree with you a little bit as far as like where they would have been if Jimmy was motivated. I feel like you had the makings to not probably make the finals run that they made unless he just goes nuclear. But I do think with the new element, which I don't want to spoil, but a certain new element that we're going to talk about later, I think would have kind of changed some things for them offensive wise, especially if you have Jimmy being somewhat of the playmaker that he is, and also late in games, which they have lost an unreal amount of close games this year. Yeah. So maybe they don't lose majority of those close games, and you look at them, they're maybe like the 4 or 5 seed, or maybe like the 6 seed or something like that. But I do think he could have helped in that regard. But I think with all the pods that we have done, especially within the last year, as far as do they go all in or do they go young, and all that, we did so many of those podcasts. Y'all have heard them. So I do think them having a hands force, of which another thing we talked about last year, I believe you and I specifically did a pod on that, of them kind of having a hands force around the draft. It didn't happen around the draft, didn't happen later in the summer. It happened right before the deadline. And so now we see, as they are of tomorrow, if they lose tomorrow, then it helps them in the draft positioning. And if they lose on Wednesday, they're guaranteed to be in the lottery.
Right.
So
with potentially 2 picks in this draft, which again, then they're going to have some unprotecteds coming forward, and that's an issue. And you got to fast track the timeline so you're not giving away unprotected picks. But at the very least, I'll say this for Jimmy: it's better that he had his tantrums before the trade deadline than after, as it turned out. Okay, because the only other solution then would have been to just hold him until the end of the season, and then you weren't going to work out an extension with him at that point. Either way, it wasn't going to happen. And then you were really stuck if he opted in. And then what? Okay. And then you're starting next season like that. So the way I look at it is, at least it happened while they could still do something, that ultimately should materially make the team better going forward, even if, again, you miss Jimmy. And I think the other thing on the Jimmy part of this is, as you watch him in Golden State and what he's relying on right now, he's basically a free throw merchant, and the Heat need that. I'm not going to diminish their need for that, because you mentioned a lot of the close games they've lost. A lot of them were because they couldn't get control of the game, couldn't settle it down. They don't have a guy to get to the line consistently. That's my issue with Tyler as a number one, because he doesn't get to the line. I like a lot of the other things he does, but the thing with Jimmy is he was doing that. But again, what you see in Golden State, even on the times that he's been on the court when Steph hasn't, he doesn't carry anymore. He doesn't. It's few and far between. He's had a couple games where he's done that with them, but for the most part, you can't lean on him to do that. And I think the Heat were kidding. Well, they weren't kidding themselves, because they decided not to give him the extension right away. But I think fans were kidding themselves if they thought Jimmy could still be that player all the time. He can't. He's 35. I mean, it just doesn't happen anymore. Like Dwayne, even the purple shirt series, which people remember, yeah, Dwayne could summon it at times, but he couldn't summon it all the time. And this is a team that needs somebody to summon it all the time, and he just wasn't going to be that anymore. All right, I'll do number 3 here, and I'll let you close with the last 2. I'll let you talk the whole time after the break here. So so get ready for him. I'll mention the one you might not mention. I got to give Tyler credit. I do, and we just did a podcast, Brady and I, after the New Orleans game, and who's the MVP of the team this year, and for him it's Tyler, and I still believe Bam, flashes as being their best all around player. I think Bam is still their floor in a lot of ways, but to me the thing that strikes me about Tyler when you look at the numbers, 24-5-5. I mean that's the best season the Heat guard has had since Dwayne. And then you look at the efficiency is very solid. I know he dipped. There was about 2-3 weeks after the All-Star break, he was not very good. But you look at his last 10 games, and the efficiency numbers there right back where they were before the All-Star break. And I think the best thing for them regarding him is this. Okay, he's restored his trade value if that's what you care about. Okay, that's the first thing. I think again he's an asset on his current contract. Now, the question of the extension, we're going to do many episodes on that, okay, and what the Heat should do related to that. But he's not a negative asset anymore in that regard, and I think he's basically proven that he can be the second best scorer on a really good team. They need to find the first, and I think he's proven that he could. Look, he's stayed healthy. I mean, he's going to play. He's sitting out the last game, but I think he's at 76 games. I mean, that's what the good players in the league are expected to do, get to 73 to 76 games. And he's right there in the modern era. So I just think we got to acknowledge that Tyler was challenged. He was called fragile. He was challenged. I mean, UD said he should come off the bench. And ultimately, he ended up being an all-star who had his second wind, which I give him credit for, and was out there all the time. It was a very good player for them this year. Again, that doesn't mean that I think he's a 1A on a championship contending team, but he was a very good player for them this year. And I think if you said before the season, this is what you're going to get out of Tyler Herro, I think every single Heat fan would have taken it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we're definitely talking about positives this season. I think Tyler held up his end this season. Now, he did have a couple of dips. I think after a strong stretch, he had a few games, or like a week or two where he dipped off, but then he came back up, and then he also had that long stretch of a dip after, well, not after the All-Star break, it was after he was named an All-Star, and then he dipped off for quite a while, almost a month, and then came back. So shout out to him for showing some resilience. But I think if you just look at where he shows some improvements, you have to talk about the up and under move. To try to get to the free throw line. I think he did that. He's shown on ball. He's shown some off ball. We're seeing more off ball as they've kind of worked to get him off ball. But I think, yeah, we're definitely talking about positive. You have to talk about what Tyler has done this season, whether you are of the group of fans who want to keep him and think he can be a part of a championship contending team in Miami, or if you are a part of the group that would like to see the Miami Heat move on and use Tyler as, kind of a key to get some, different pieces in Miami, whether via the drafts or some other players in the league.
Yeah, and I think these are all reasonable debates, and Tyler's never going to escape from that stuff. He's just not, because when you have a player who's more of a one-way player, even if he's really skilled at that, then there's always going to be a question of whether or not that guy can lead you really deep into the postseason. Again, unless you're Steph, that's really it. And that's why these comparisons become so challenging. But you look at what Giannis contributes. You look at those kind of guys. I know Jokic is not an elite defender, but he's better than people give him credit for, actually. And so I think that and that, look, this is a question. I'm not comparing Tyler. Tyler's not Luka. Okay, I mean, again, as far as scoring talent and all the other things that Luka brings, size, all of it. But that's a question with Luka about winning a championship too. And that was one of the issues that Dallas was idiotic to trade him even in light of that. But there has been that question about whether or not you can have a guy who he's not a positive on one end of the floor. Like but you're so reliant on him to play 40 minutes, can you win a title with him? Certainly so someone like Tyler is not immune from those conversations either. And that's the thing. They have to build the team that complements him, that sort of covers his weaknesses to a certain degree. And I think they're getting closer to that with the trade that they made, but they're not there yet because I still think they need the other guys. And I think the other thing we have to acknowledge with all the positives is the clutch shooting in particular is problematic. That has to get better.
I don't think it's just a clutch shooting. I think the clutch decision making. Yeah. Which again, to be fair to him, I don't see Tyler as a 1A or a 1B. I do think he's a very plus addition. I won't call him a role player because it's disrespectful, but I think he's a very plus, addition. And I think in those situations, it shouldn't be him, right? We've seen Bam in those situations, in high situations in the playoffs. But I think if Tyler is your third B player on a championship team with really two strong, 1A and, all of that, I think you do have a really good team, but that's not the reality for Miami. And with the decision making coming up, which we're not talking about right now, but with decision making coming up as far as his extension and the number you're already paying Bam, all of that, like when you're trying to build a team, you're in a hard position right now.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, they have to figure it out. But again, the fact that they've actually picked some kind of a direction, that they can lean into now, I think is a positive. All right, we'll get your last two on the other side here with Eternal Bast, talking about the 5 positive developments from a down Miami Heat season. Here's a development you don't want happening. You don't want your house being torn down by a natural disaster, right? So reach out to our friends over at All Pro Construction Builders. You can find them at All Pro Construction Builders on Instagram or allproconstructionbuilders.com. Reach out to Danny directly, 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. Family business, huge Miami Heat fans based here in Miami. Again, you can see all of it on the IG at All Pro Construction Builders. They'll give you a free estimate to protect your house from storms. It's always hurricane season in South Florida, but also they'll give you 5.5% off your entire order if you mention 5 Reasons or 5 on the Floor. So check them out. It's All Pro Construction Builders on Instagram or allproconstructionbuilders.com. Reach out to Danny at 305-484-4429 and get your home or business protected today. All right, Eternal, what's yours? Your last two.
Oh man. So my last two, Davion. If I had to just say his name, I think that's enough. I think people understand what he has been able to do for the Heat post Jimmy trade. The defense that he gives you, that is the type of defense, that is the type of energy, enthusiasm, like all of that. That is something that you want on the team because it's contagious. That is a very valuable player to have. Everything he does on offense is a benefit. I mean, you see how quickly he gets up and down the court. He finishes in transition. He looks to pass, all of that. Now, I don't think he is, a starter on a championship team, but Miami doesn't have a championship team right now. But I do think he is a great glue guy to have. And I also think if you draft a young guard or if you trade for a guard, I think he is a perfect backup regardless of the situation. So I would say that is a very, very big positive, is them getting Davion and not having to fight for a player like that on the open market. You can re-sign him. And yeah, I want to get your thoughts on that before I move on to it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, I think he's a must re-sign to me. He's a must re-sign. Like I don't, like, to me, Heat fans were upset about losing Gabe Vincent, and I just think Davion Mitchell is a much better player than Gabe Vincent.
Oh, I agree.
Right? I mean, he's now that the shot's there, and I don't think he's going to go in the tank on the shot. The form is good. Like this is not something where I think they had to totally deconstruct it, rebuild it, or anything. It just seems like confidence to me. He gets arc on the shot. He sets his feet. He doesn't take bad ones. That's one of the things I like about him. Like, he makes sure it's a good shot. Like, it's not like Kyle, where Kyle wouldn't shoot. I'm talking about Lowry, towards the end of his Heat tenure. after he'd been a prolific 3-point shooter throughout his career. He's not reluctant to shoot in that way, but he's also not chucking. Okay. And we know other guards on the team who do. He's not chucking. Okay. He is very disciplined about the shots he takes. I love the fact on offense that he gets a foot in the paint and then can make a decision. That's something that again, that's a guard skill. Like he looks like if you didn't know, honestly, and we all knew about the defensive reputation, but if we didn't know about his reputation as really struggling offensively when he came into the NBA, and you just watched him as a player, you would not understand it. He doesn't look like a player who ever could have struggled that bad offensively. Like we've seen some bad offensive players on the Heat. Like this is not one of them. So to me, he's a must sign. Also from an attitude perspective, he's got personality. You see him talking on the court. He's talking in the huddle. And it gets back to one of my positives that the Jimmy stuff happened early enough in the season that they were able to make a move like this. Somebody they targeted for a while, but weren't necessarily even going to get in that trade until the Kyle Anderson part of it blew up, and they had to be another move that was made. So no, it's to me, he's definitely one of the top fives, and he'll be back next year. I think a turnout part of this is teams look at the Heat's success with this type of player, and this is a higher upside player than some of the undrafteds. Obviously, he was a first-round pick, but I think they look at their success with it, and I don't think other teams are going to overpay for that anymore. I don't. I don't think a team's going to look at Davion Mitchell, who's been out there for anybody pretty much, and say, yeah, we can replicate or improve upon what he did with the Heat. I don't think so. So I don't think that this mega offer is coming. Not a lot of teams have money, and the Heat can match it anyway. So I'd be surprised if he's not back next year. All right, give us the close. 5 positives here in a down season for the Miami Heat.
Okay, so I want to actually surprise Ethan. Ethan doesn't know about this, but Sean and I were talking about this on the Discord earlier. You heard the ad in the pod already, so I'm not going to do it. But we talked about Bam Adebayo's 3-point makes this season. The only person that was close to Bam's makes this season is the same person that wanted Bam to stop shooting threes. And that is one Ethan J. Skolnick.
Yeah.
Before I pass it to you, though, because I had it pinned. Before this season, we all talked about what Bam's 3-point attempts would be.
Right.
You were wrong on that. But you said he wouldn't get above 1.4 attempts. He finishes the season with 2.8, so almost 3 attempts a game.
Yeah.
He also finishes the season 35.7% from 3. He ends the season with 79 3-point makes while making 56 triples since January 1st. So he came out those first 39 games and was absolutely horrible from 3 with all the attempts he took, only made 25, but he finished up strong, especially through February and March, shooting 40% and 50% respectively. Ethan, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm going to acknowledge something here and we'll close. Thank you. I would love to be celebrated for this, but there was a huge fallacy in my prediction, which I just realized as you were going through it, is I had him making 83s but shooting 1.4 per game, which means that I anticipated that he was going to shoot 67% from 3. So I tried to have it both ways, and one of them hit. So there you go. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. It's fuzzy math. What do they call it? What Boss Burrow used to call it? Fuzzy math? I don't know. It was, which is fuzzy math. Yes, so I guess I expected him to make 1 out of 1.4 in every game, which would make him the greatest 3-point shooter in NBA history. I'll give him credit, though. I will give him credit for picking it up. And again, I said at the beginning of this, I still don't think it's the biggest factor in his improvement going forward. I still think it's getting the mid-range back where he wants it consistently and then taking guys off the dribble. I still think that's it. But I'll say this. I was the guy who didn't want Bast shooting threes, and I was wrong. And so I said, I'll play the big villain again and do it for Bam. All right, Eternal, we appreciate it. We managed to get through 30 minutes and 5 things in a season that currently is, 37 and 44. We'll have coverage after the Washington game, whatever that is. We'll set you up for Chicago the rest of the week. Check us out on Playback. Check us out on Off the Floor. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you for letting me know that I'm no longer any good at math.